Imagine this. You wake up in an Amish home, not to the sound of an alarm clock or a phone buzzing, but to the faint creak of the floorboards as someone in a bonnet moves quietly past your door. It's not 8 a.m., not even 6 a.m. It's closer to 4:30, and your day is already expected to begin. There is no option to snooze or roll over. The Amish woman's life starts before sunrise because chores wait for no one. Cows need to be milked, bread needs to rise, and children must be dressed and fed before the men head out to the fields. For a modern woman used to a slow morning routine with coffee and scrolling through social media, this reality hits like ice water. In an Amish home, dawn isn't gentle, it's a call to action. Already, within the first hour, you feel the weight of a world that doesn't revolve around convenience. No electricity means no instant coffee, no hairdryer, no warm glow from a phone screen to ease you awake. Instead, you're expected to rise with discipline and begin the work of the day alongside everyone else. And that's where most modern women would already stumble. The thought of functioning at full speed before sunrise, without caffeine or comfort, is enough to make the challenge unbearable. Yet, for Amish women, this is just the beginning, and what feels impossible for outsiders is nothing more than normal life. Morning chores before breakfast. By the time most modern women would just be opening their eyes, Amish women have already been hard at work for hours. The day begins with barn chores, stepping out into the biting cold, lantern in hand, to milk cows, feed chickens, and muck stalls. There's no heated barn, no automatic milking machines, no bags of prepackaged feed. Every pail of water is hauled by hand, every animal fed from what was harvested and stored earlier in the year. Imagine carrying heavy buckets before sunrise, your breath hanging in the freezing air, while the rest of the world is still under blankets. For Amish women, this is not a hardship, it's a responsibility. For outsiders, it's already a breaking point, and when the livestock are fed, the chores continue indoors. Breakfast isn't a quick bowl of cereal or a slice of toast, it's a full spread prepared from scratch. Bread is baked, eggs collected from the coop are fried, and sometimes sausage or bacon is pulled from jars that were canned months earlier. Coffee is brewed not from a pod or a machine, but boiled over the stove. All of this takes place while managing children, keeping fires stoked, and tidying the house. The sheer pace and workload of a single Amish morning would overwhelm most women within the first few hours. In an Amish home, breakfast doesn't appear on the table. It's wrestled into existence through hard work and careful preparation. At this point, you've been awake for just 3 or 4 hours, and exhaustion is already creeping in. You're sweating from chores, your arms ache from carrying water, and the thought of sitting down for breakfast feels like a reward. But the Amish woman doesn't complain. She simply sets the food down and moves on, because her day is only beginning. The endless work after breakfast. You might think the hardest part of the morning is over once breakfast is served, but for an Amish woman, that meal is just the starting line. The moment dishes are cleared, the real work of the household begins. There are no dishwashers to load, no microwaves to reheat leftovers. Every plate, pot, and pan must be scrubbed by hand, often in cold water carried from a well or pump. Soap isn't bought in plastic bottles from the supermarket. It's sometimes homemade, lye-based, and rough on the skin. The simple act of cleaning up after breakfast is already more work than most modern households spend on 3 meals combined. And then comes laundry, a task that feels more like an endurance test. Imagine washing clothes without a washing machine, without hot running water, without a dryer humming in the background. Amish women often scrub garments by hand or use old-fashioned wringer washers powered by hand or generator. What might take a modern woman an hour with modern appliances can consume half a day for an Amish woman, yet she does it without complaint, because it is her duty. On top of this, floors must be swept, beds made, lamps refilled with kerosene, and ashes from the stove cleaned out. Children need tending, fed again, schooled at home, or bundled up for the walk to the Amish schoolhouse. The house is a living, breathing machine, and Amish women are its caretakers. There's no outsourcing, no shortcuts, no "I'll order it online instead." Every detail of the home's survival depends on her hands. By mid-morning, most outsiders would already be defeated. The sheer repetition, the absence of conveniences, and the never-ending cycle of chores would grind down even the strongest will. But for the Amish woman, this is normal, an ordinary Tuesday, done without complaint, without hesitation, and with a quiet strength that has carried her people through centuries. The afternoon grind, gardens, sewing, and food preservation. By the time noon arrives, most modern women would be ready to collapse after the endless morning of chores. But for an Amish woman, the day is only halfway through, and her responsibilities now shift into another demanding phase. After clearing away the lunch meal, again all made from scratch, she turns her energy to the backbone of survival: gardens, sewing, and food preservation. Step outside, and you'll find her in the garden, even in the biting cold of early spring or the sweltering heat of late summer. Vegetables must be weeded, harvested, or prepared for canning. There are no machines to till or automate these tasks. It is hands in the soil, back bent under the sun, season after season. What she grows here isn't just for tonight's dinner. It will fill shelves of mason jars stacked in the cellar, ensuring her family eats long after the garden is bare. For a modern woman used to grabbing groceries on the way home from work, this constant vigilance over food feels like a full-time job in itself. When the garden work eases, there's sewing to be done. Amish women make clothing for their families, and it is not a hobby. It is a necessity. Dresses, aprons, trousers, shirts, quilts, all hand-stitched or worked on treadle sewing machines. Imagine outfitting an entire family without ever stepping into a store. Every stitch matters, every scrap of fabric is saved, nothing is wasted. For a modern woman who sees sewing as old-fashioned or optional, the weight of this responsibility would feel overwhelming. But for Amish women, it is an act of love and duty. Food preservation is another cornerstone of their afternoons. Vegetables harvested in summer must be blanched, canned, or dried. Fruits are turned into preserves or pie fillings stored for winter. Meat is salted, smoked, or canned in jars, often in sweltering kitchens filled with steam from boiling pots. Picture the heat of canning day. Amish women working for hours with sweat on their brows, shelves filling with jars that represent security for the long, cold months ahead. For modern women, the idea of putting up food like this is foreign, replaced by freezers and supermarkets. But for the Amish, it is survival, and it requires both relentless energy and careful precision. By the middle of the afternoon, you're not just physically tired, you're mentally drained. There are no breaks for scrolling phones, no coffee shops to duck into, no conveniences to lean on. Every action requires forethought, labor, and endurance. And yet, the Amish woman carries on without complaint, moving from one task to the next, powered not by convenience, but by faith and necessity. It is in this relentless, disciplined afternoon grind that most modern women would realize lasting 24 hours in an Amish home isn't just difficult, it's nearly impossible. Evening pressures, dinner, children, and the second round of chores. By the time late afternoon arrives, you might think an Amish woman finally earns a moment to rest. But in truth, the evening is one of the busiest times of her day. While modern women might be winding down with a coffee, a phone in hand, or prepping for a quick takeout dinner, Amish women are only just shifting into another phase of relentless work. Dinner isn't fast, easy, or prepackaged. It is another full, from-scratch meal for an entire family, often with guests or neighbors stopping by. Meat pulled from jars or smoked earlier in the year must be cooked slowly. Vegetables from the garden are peeled and boiled, fresh bread is baked, and desserts are sometimes prepared to stretch the meal. Imagine preparing a feast every single night without microwaves, mixers, or store-bought shortcuts. It's not glamorous, it's exhausting. Yet Amish women do it daily, knowing that the meal doesn't just fill stomachs, it anchors the family together at the table. At the same time, children must be tended to. Amish mothers teach their children not with iPads or TV shows, but with direct guidance and patience. Homework from the Amish schoolhouse is checked, while younger children may need help with reading or sewing practice. Babies and toddlers demand constant attention, and there are no electronic babysitters to provide relief. Everything, education, discipline, entertainment, falls back onto the mother's shoulders. For an outsider, the sheer mental load of this responsibility, piled onto an already exhausting day, feels unbearable. And then, when you think she's finished, there's still a second round of chores. Animals must be fed again before nightfall. Chickens need to be shut safely in their coops, cows given evening feed, and stables checked. By the time dinner is finally served, eaten, and cleaned up, most modern women would feel utterly defeated. The body aches, the hands are raw from labor, and the weight of responsibility never lifts. For the Amish woman, however, this is not punishment. It is her calling. She doesn't see it as extraordinary. It is simply life. And it is in this normalcy that outsiders find their greatest shock. What they would call impossible is, to her, just another day lived with quiet strength. Nightfall, when the work should end, but doesn't. For most modern women, nighttime signals rest. The glow of a TV show, the comfort of hot showers, and the promise of sinking into bed with the day behind them. But in an Amish home, nightfall doesn't end the work. It simply changes its shape. Once the animals are fed, the children tucked in, and dinner dishes scrubbed clean, a new round of responsibilities begins, and this is where the exhaustion feels endless. The lamps must be checked. There is no switch to flip and forget about. Kerosene lamps or oil lanterns must be cleaned, trimmed, and refilled so that tomorrow morning begins with light ready to shine. Imagine wiping soot, handling fragile glass, and carefully storing flammable oil every single night, tasks most modern women have never even considered. Then comes mending. Clothes torn during the day are not tossed into a hamper to be forgotten. They are repaired before the next sunrise. Amish women sit by lamplight with needle and thread, patching holes in trousers, reinforcing hems, or working on quilts that will keep the family warm through winter. Each stitch is small, but together they represent a life of diligence. For outsiders, just the thought of sewing late into the night after a 16-hour day is unthinkable. For Amish women, it is simply routine. There's also planning for the next day. Bread dough may be set to rise overnight, vegetables brought up from the root cellar, or meat laid out for tomorrow's meals. Water may need to be carried in buckets and set aside for morning chores. Every detail is managed with foresight because forgetting something could mean doubling the workload tomorrow. And through it all, the weight of physical fatigue presses down. Amish women do not collapse into cushioned chairs with central heating humming in the background. They sit on wooden benches, their hands rough from labor, their backs aching, their eyes heavy from hours without pause. Yet they carry on because the work of the home does not bend to comfort. It demands discipline until the last light is out. By this point, nearly 18 hours into her day, most modern women would break. The lack of rest, The constant responsibility and the absence of every modern convenience would feel crushing. But the Amish woman does not break. She bows her head in quiet prayer, gives thanks for the day, and lies down knowing she will rise again before dawn to repeat it all.